David, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with me today.
Yeah, nice to meet you, man.
It's great to meet you too. There's so much I want to talk to you about. But I want to start with Sunday Morning. I love this show so much. It's so meaningful to me. I really grew up on it, watching it with my dad when Charles Osgood was doing it, and I still have like a ritual around it, waking up on Sundays, having my coffee. You've done some really, really great segments lately. I know you're like the science and tech explainer. And one that really stood out to me recently was when you interviewed astronauts on a mission aboard the International Space Station.
From this very desk. That was truly the highlight of my career. I mean, you could probably tell I was like a 4-year-old in a candy store. They were in space and I was at my desk. It was like when Richard Nixon made the first phone call to astronauts in space from the White House. It was just, except I had video.
That was absolutely incredible. And I'm so glad you asked them what happens with their pee. And we found out that they recycle it and drink it. I was dying to know.
I have to say, I'm impressed that you're a committed viewer of the show. I agree with you. I think there's nothing like it on TV. They give us just insane amounts of trust, and I mean, like the story ideas are generally mine, and they just say go do it, and they give us so much time to tell the story, and we have a budget to travel and all that stuff. But the show's viewership skews older than you. So I'm impressed that you're beginning the next generation of Sunday morning viewers.
Oh yeah, I am always turning people onto it. I watch it on YouTube with my friends all the time too.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
I want to ask you a lot about the process. I really want to understand how a story goes from its inception to actually getting on the air. So, like, take me through, let's say Coney Island is a recent one you did. You just wake up one morning and say, "Hey, I'm curious about the history of Coney Island. Let's see who we can talk to there."
So the show is, as you may know, about 42 years old, something like that, and it began life as a Sunday morning arts and culture show. So it's not a lot of politics. There's not a lot of nastiness, negativity. To this day, it will it. I love the way we'll take something that's been around right under our noses and do a deep dive. How did it get like that? How's it doing? What makes it tick? And the Coney Island story was an example of that. That one was not my idea. It was the Sunday Morning has about I'm going to say 25 producers, and it's their job to research the story, develop the story, line up the guests, the interviews, and sometimes they even write the story. I write all my own stories. So once the interviews are complete, they send it to a transcription company, and what I get back is looks like it's a Word document with what looks like a screenplay. It's I said this and the other person said this, and I work from that to write the script. Sometimes the producers do that too, but anyway, there's this great producer named Gabe Falcon, and he had that idea. He was reading up on Coney Island and found out all these astonishing, quirky things. It was where ice cream first debuted, and cotton candy, and the House of Mirrors and roller coasters. All of those things began life at Coney Island, and it's still around after 150 years. So anyway, so I jumped on it. I said I'd love to work with you on that.
Yeah, that was a great piece. I love that you went on the roller coaster, and that mayor, the mayor of Coney Island, what a character he is.
Such a character. Oh my gosh.
Incredible. You've been with the show like 20 years, right? Coming up on 20 years?
That's right. You've done your research.
Oh yeah, of course I had to. So how did the opportunity come about? I know you were probably with the Times at that time, doing tech reviews.
That is exactly right. That's exactly how it happened. I was writing this weekly tech column for the New York Times, and Sunday Morning wanted a story about this revolutionary new device called a digital camera. It was 2002, and so they thought, well, let's ask that guy who writes gadget reviews over at the Times, and so they asked me if I'd be interested in doing a one-off. And you may know that Sunday Morning sometimes features what amounts to essays. It's a person with a black backdrop just talking to camera for a couple of minutes, and that's what they intended for the digital camera story, is just me sitting on a stool talking to the camera. But my producer, this guy Doug Smith, who really taught me everything I know, said, we should open this up. We should make this a real story. We should go out and about with the cameras and take pictures of animals and things and talk our way through it. And so we did that, and it turned out that I loved it, and the show loved it, and so they gave me more and more assignments.
David, what do you think? I think we're kind of laying the groundwork here for that, but what do you think really sets apart the show from other news programs?
I think the main thing is the time. We get between 6 and 9 minutes, sometimes 10 to 15 minutes if it's really important to tell the story. And I mean, the evening news guys are raging jealous. We get 45 seconds. So it's a luxury. We can feature multiple experts during each story. We can weave together different points of view. We can build an arc. I like to, not every time, but often I like to bookend the story, begin in one place, take viewers through a story, and then return to that original scene or person with a little quip that puts everything back into context. So the main one is the time that we have to tell the stories, but another one is as I mentioned, that it's just not a nasty show. It's just both internally and externally. It's a warm, gentle, funny, fascinating tone, I think, that I think people really appreciate on their Sunday mornings. They've had horrible news on TV all week.
Absolutely, it's so appreciated. Tell me a little bit more about your approach in storytelling specifically for this show.
Usually I don't know the story when I start doing the reporting. I mean, I don't know. Right now I'm doing a story about the supply chain crisis. How come you can't get anything? Restaurants can't get ingredients, and publishers can't get paper, and so on. And I don't really know why not. I mean, I gather it has something to do with container ships unable to be unloaded at port, probably because of the labor shortage. It has something to do with a booming demand after the pandemic, but I don't know. So we're gonna go out. We're going to interview a supply chain expert at MIT. We're going to talk to a paper mill owner. We're going to talk to a restaurant owner who can't get bacon or Gatorade. And so we're going to try to represent different parts of the supply chain and get to the bottom of it. So the producer generally is in charge of lining up who the experts will be. And, he or she runs them by me, and we sort of shape it together over the phone. And then they put it on the schedule, and we have these amazing crews, which is something that viewers completely forget about. There's an entire administration behind the scenes of camera operators and sound people that have to be lined up too. And then we travel. We go wherever we have to go to shoot the story, and that means hotels and lifts and meal receipts and all of that. Various correspondents have various ways of doing the interviews themselves. I don't use notes. I don't have anything in my lap. And I don't carve out the direction for the interview in advance. What I do is read up as much as I can about whoever's talking, read stuff they've written, look at other interviews they've done. I do type out a list of questions, but as you know, as a student, you tend to remember things better when you've written them out. And so it's on that principle that I tend to just remember the questions that I'd had. During the interview, the producer is on hand and taking notes. And often, I'd say always, the producer has a couple of questions that they'd like me to ask after I'm done, things I didn't get to. And I'd say a lot of the time, those questions come out to elicit the best answers. Maybe it's something to do with the subject feels like, oh, well, the main interview's over, I can relax a little bit. This is just a PS question. But they're fantastic experiences. I try really hard to make it a great experience for the subject. So I get there early. Instead of hanging out with the crew, I hang out with them while they're setting up the lights. We chat about this and that. I prepare them as best I can. I reassure every single time, I reassure them that this is not live. So if you stumble or if you say something by mistake, that's no problem. This is all going to be edited. We're here to make you look good. And that usually reassures people a lot, especially people who haven't done this before and are pretty nervous.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's
I think that really comes through. I feel like everyone always seems so comfortable on the show that it's just a conversation more than like a stern interview.
Yeah, it really is. And I think the more at ease you put somebody, the better an interview they'll give you.
And I find personally that you just always liven up the show. I think you're one of the most entertaining correspondents on the program. And there's a seasonal correspondent that I'm a big fan of. His name is Techno Claus. Some people say you look very much like Techno Claus.
Techno Claus, guru of gadgets and gear.
Can the viewers expect Techno Claus again this winter? And how did this concept come about?
Techno Claus will return. It's been going on like 11 years or something now. And I remember, all right, so my family has always been really into doggerel, rhymed verse. And we would always write little rhyming poems for birthdays and graduations and celebrations. So it comes very easy to me to write rhymed, metered poetry. As you may know, I used to be a Broadway conductor. I used to want to write musicals. And so I've written the lyrics for a lot of shows. So the very first one, again, with Doug Smith, my first producer, the show just asked me to do maybe we should do a tech gifts for the holidays story. That was all I got. That was the assignment. And I just thought it'd be fun to do it in verse. So the very first one wasn't in character. It was just in verse. And then the second year, I honestly don't remember who suggested adding the costume. And the accent is very much contentious.
I love the accent.
I mean, people can't place it. Is it Bronx? Is it Brooklyn? Is it Jersey? I don't know. They say, why do you do that? It sounds bad. I don't know. And a couple of years I've brought this up. Twitter jumps on me every year and says, yeah, that was great, but what's with that stupid accent? And I had a big, profound meeting with the show's head producers a couple of years ago, and I'm like, should we drop the accent? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And they're like, you can't drop it now. It's a persona.
That's amazing.
So Techno Claus will live on, and he'll talk with the same confused accent.
I know the viewers are highly anticipating that. We love Techno Claus.
Are you familiar with Casey at the Bat, the famous poem? There's a famous baseball poem from decades ago. You should Google it. It's a great rhyming verse. It starts out, the outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 6-4 with just an inning left to play. Anyway, so it's about this little small town baseball team, but they have this major killer hitter named Casey. And they know that he'll load the bases and win the game. And anyway, it has a surprise twist at the end. So it became really popular. It was made into movies. People wrote sequels to it. People memorized the entire 9-minute poem. I memorized it as a kid. But the part people forget is that Casey at the Bat was written by a newspaper man. It was written by a reporter who spent his whole career trying to make him name for himself as a serious reporter. He threw out that Casey at the Bat thing as a joke one Christmas. And that's all anyone remembers him for, is this stupid baseball poem. And I sometimes feel like that. I'll be on a plane somewhere and, I've won 6 Emmys, I've published books, but they'll know it's, hey, it's Techno Claus.
I don't think that's going to be your fate. No way. David, you mentioned that you were a Broadway composer and you played in the pits for 10 years. And I was previously unaware of this. And I was really surprised that you went to Yale for music. I would have expected journalism. And then in doing some more research, I was even more surprised that you didn't go to law school because you come from a family of attorneys. Was it difficult for you to resist that career path? And was your family supportive of your music ambitions?
Yeah, it was difficult for my dad that I didn't follow that career path. My father, grandfather, great-grandfather were all lawyers. My brother and sister are both lawyers. It was pretty much expected. And no, it did not go down well when I expressed an interest in going into music. My father was very dismissive and said, he was supportive to an extent. So I remember he said, why don't you spend 2 years sort of getting this out of your system? And if you are indeed conducting a Broadway show in 2 years, okay, but otherwise you're going to law school or business school. So he sort of gave me this window where he supported me a little bit financially right out of college. And then I was in fact conducting a Broadway show by the time I was 25, and my dad's attitude changed completely. Then it was cocktail parties. My youngest son is a Broadway conductor. It was all different once it actually happened. So, I give him some credit for being willing to entertain the notion, and I don't totally blame him for considering it a little bit black sheepy and outside the fold. But I don't think anybody minds. I also I left the Times after 13 years in 2013 because Yahoo made me an offer that I could not refuse. They offered, this is not a joke, 10 times the salary I was making at the Times.
Wow.
I mean, I knew it was Yahoo. I knew I'd be, I'd disappear as far as the public was concerned. But I mean, that was a once in a lifetime nest egg opportunity. And they offered a lot of freedom and, my own staff and stuff like that. So, but my parents were not thrilled by that. My dad famously said, I've gone to the newsstand outside the law firm every day for 40 years to pick up the New York Times. Never once have I seen a copy of Yahoo there. Yeah, Dad, it's a website. But now that I'm full-time at Sunday Morning, I think all is forgiven. And I think my parents they watch every single week, and they always send me a little note or phone call to say how much they like the story. So I think I've redeemed myself.
And you described yourself as a magic buff. I know you've done like a ton of magic shows. Did you ever do magic shows for your parents' friends, like at dinner parties and things? I'm sure they must have loved that.
I was trotted out regularly at the parties. Yeah. I was indeed. I honestly, Michael, I've never had an interview where somebody did more research than you have. That is absolutely right. I was a kid magician. I did, I think, 400 birthday parties during my teenage years and block parties. I ultimately wrote Magic for Dummies. I have wooed many a girlfriend with magic tricks, and yeah, I was the entertainment at many many a parental party.
That was an interesting thing for me to read about, because it made me think that doing all those shows must have prepared you to become a performer, which you still are to some degree.
Precisely. That is exactly what happened. I mean, doing those shows made me comfortable in front of a crowd, made me a ham, made me improvisational enough to wing it when things went off the rails. That is exactly what prepared me for television. There's absolutely no doubt. And speaking engagements. I mean, it all came from being on stage hundreds and hundreds of times as a kid.
And I was also, I came across this clip of you, or a letter you had written to David Letterman, The Late Show with David Letterman. I really enjoyed this, and it made me think more about how you came to be where you are. And, you know, I imagine that Letterman was a big influence on you. I want to play this clip I have from that show. You wrote in about Dave's microphone that he had on his desk that you felt must have been a prop.
Letter number 4. Dear Dave, what the hell is that big silver capsule thing on your desk? And don't try to tell us it's a microphone. We can all see your actual microphone clipped to your tie in plain sight. Desperate to know David Pogue, New York, New York. Well, he's right. He's very observant. Here is the actual microphone that we use. And, of course, this wouldn't be a microphone. It's more for our peace of mind. You know, if we ever have, trouble with a guest. In fact, here, let me just demonstrate for you how this works. You just grab it and you just, like that.
So Dave revealed that the microphone's actually an eject button. I thought that was so cool. So did Letterman kind of inform your sense of humor?
I think so. I think so. His willingness to acknowledge and push against the bounds of the format, you know, self-referential. I think before that, it was probably Monty Python. I don't know if you've ever had much exposure to Monty Python, but when I was growing up, oh my God, that show killed me. Just the absurdity. So yeah, absurd humor is still the only thing that can actually make me laugh out loud. My wife is one of the few people who can routinely make me laugh, not out of politeness, but out of helplessness. I remember early on, we were doing video chat, and so we were on camera in a FaceTime call, but also type chatting in iMessage. And I'd never seen her. This is very early on. I'd never seen her with her hair back before. And I'm like, how do you do that? Like, is that a hair clip or a rubber band? And she goes, glue. And I just like, she had me from that day. I'm like, glue. Okay. So yeah, so I think Monty Python first, and maybe Letterman later.
I want to talk some more about your days reviewing tech. I think you were kind of doing that at a pivotal moment in technology. I mean, you saw the iPhone get rolled out. I listened back to an obituary from, I think we're coming up on just the 10th year anniversary of it, your obituary of Steve Jobs that aired on Sunday Morning. I have a little clip of that.
Steve Jobs was one of the greatest designers to come along in decades, and one of the greatest marketers and businessmen and visionaries. All of those things in one person.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think Steve was absolutely a visionary, and you had to some extent a personal relationship with him, right? He would call you at home to rant about things that you'd written he disagreed with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, he had no problem calling up journalists and screaming at them. He was very thin-skinned. You know, he was just the epitome of an interesting person, because he was a big baby. He was a tyrant and cruel sometimes, but also obviously, a genius of the kind that rarely comes along. He just knew what was coming 5 or 10 years out, or if he didn't know, he made it so, over and over again. I remember, oh man, I'll just give you a couple quick examples. So one time, Apple removed from their Macs this jack it had always had called FireWire. And the beauty of the FireWire jack is you could connect it up to your camcorder and digitize the home movies you'd taken. And Apple promoted this. They invented iMovie. They said now anyone can be a video editor. And then after a few years, they eliminated the jack, and we were all just screwed as far as I was concerned. So I wrote about that, and he called me up to rant, and he said, you don't know what we do here at Apple, do you? We know things that you will never know. I mean, he just was so on fire. And I said, Steve, look, I happen to be one of those people who got the iMovie bug. You convinced me. I'm the guy who takes videos on our camcorder of vacations and holidays, and then I edit them down into beautiful little 5-minute things. And he goes, well, how many have you edited down? I'm like, well, none yet. I'm busy. I've got 3 little kids. I'm in the middle of my life. And he goes, you're never going to edit those movies, David. You're never going to edit those.
It's unbelievable.
And my blood ran cold because he was right. I hadn't edited any of them. It was just an intention. When was I going to stop being too busy to do it? In 40 years? And for many, many, many years, I thought back to that conversation, and he was right. I didn't have time. And the raw footage piled up on backup hard drives, and I never got around to editing them. And I sometimes do it, but not the way I intended to. So he knew about me. He knew about the public without any of us realizing it. And I'll give you one other quick example. I had done this song parody when the iPhone came out in 2007 to the tune of
David. I have a little clip of that.
Oh, you have it on hand? Okay.
Let's let the people know, because I love this. This is a parody of My Way.
I too will join the cult. I want an iPhone.
So good. You have to watch the rest of that video, but please continue.
So I made this video. I went to the Apple store in New York, where people had been standing in line for a week to get the first iPhone. And I got some of the people in line to sing pieces of the song. It went viral. And then I was out to dinner with my family one night. It was like 6:30 p.m. And I get this call, and it's his administrative assistant. And she says, Dave, I have Steve on the line. He'd like to talk to you. Do you have a moment? Like, okay. I mean, the whole song made fun of iPhone mania, right? It pointed out that the thing had you couldn't remove the battery, and it couldn't take memory cards, and it just sort of mocked the people who were overhyping it. So I knew he was going to just rip me a new one. And he got on. He goes, David, I gotta say, one of my people showed me your iPhone video, the song you did. And I gotta say, I thought about it, and I want to tell you, I think it's the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, are you kidding me? He loved it. He goes, I wonder if you could send me a copy of the QuickTime file, the original, so I can have it. So you never knew which way he was gonna blow. It was hot and cold. It was, you're a hero, you're a devil. It was interesting.
That's amazing. What a unique guy. And the fact that this global CEO was calling you about iPhone parodies and reviews, I mean, it's amazing to me.
Yeah, he got his hands dirty in the PR world. He did. So
cool. David, I was also been thinking, of course, I'm like starting out my career and finishing up school and stuff. And there was this Sunday morning piece aired, I think maybe it was last week, with the former CEO of PepsiCo, woman. I think her name was Indra Nooyi, maybe. She was talking about work-life balance and how that's not really a thing, and it's really a juggling act. I'm curious what you think of that.
In terms of my own
Yeah, in terms of your own experience.
I mean, what's very weird about my life is that I have almost never had a 9-to-5 job. I've never had a Monday to Friday 9-to-5 job ever. So I've written books, I give talks, I write a lot. I do the TV stories, but I've never gone to an office 5 days a week. And that has given me the luxury of being able to move time around. As kids came along, I would work and then they would come home from school and I would stop and I'd come downstairs and, hang out with them, and then they'd go to bed and then I'd go back to work or whatever. So I've been able to make time very squishy and amorphous and move it around. I would say I'm also really, really, really efficient and productive. If you could see how I've decked out this Mac with shortcuts and typing expanders, I mean, it's absurd. Like if you tried to type on my Mac, you'd lose your mind, because I have something like 500 two-letter abbreviations that expand into regular words. PL is problem, BC is because, and on and on. T is the, TH is that. So I type about, a quarter as many letters as you see on the screen. So super efficient. I'm really into macros and automation. The scripts come back from the Sunday morning interviews in a format that I don't like. So I've written, Microsoft Word macros that reformat it and make all the quotes curly. And anyway, so super, super efficient. And I think those two things have helped me keep my head afloat.
You were saying something about having never really worked 9-to-5, and it reminds me of when you were working in Broadway and you kind of came to this realization that you couldn't be paid like for your time by the hour. And you were talking about Pogue's theory of geometrical income, and this was fascinating to me. Can you elaborate on that theory for us?
Where did you find that? I think I've told that story only once in my entire life.
I had to do some digging, David.
Oh my God. Cannot believe you've heard that. Well, in retrospect, this is perhaps a very elitist thing to say, but in my 20s, when I was working for an hourly or weekly salary, I realized that as a musician in New York, it would be hard for me to get ahead. I was never going to be able to afford a house or, a family with vacations and Christmas presents on the salary of a musician in New York. And it occurred to me that it's because I was working arithmetically. Work X hours, get paid X dollars. And that the way to do it, if you really want to get ahead, is to try to do something where you get paid geometrically for your work. So write a book, write a song, do something that can go viral and bring you royalties forever based on a short amount of work. Well, relatively short. So that's when I started really going after writing books. And, for a long time, it paid off handsomely. I wrote 7 of the blah, blah, blah for dummies books. And they did indeed, we live in what we call the house that dummies built. So it did indeed pay off. Of course, the really, immature aspect of that theory is that not very many people have the opportunity to choose between arithmetically paid jobs and geometrically paid jobs. But
sure,
I guess in a larger sense, what I was saying was, if you have the opportunity to do something big, go for it. It might not pay off, but it might.
I think that's a really insightful theory. I think it's valuable. So thank you.
And I will say, by the way, in my defense, that the pandemic has, I think, brought about thousands and thousands of people who came upon that realization themselves, because, we have, especially in the service industry, this labor shortage. People were laid off from the jobs as hotel check-in reps and cashiers and waiters, jobs they'd never liked, that didn't pay well. And a lot of people have had sort of a reckoning during the pandemic and said, wait a minute, I need to reevaluate what I'm doing with my time. I met a guy in August who had been a waiter And he decided to go to correspondence course to be a plumber. So to open up his own business and to start afresh. And the lady was just telling me he had just gotten back from a vacation with his family to Europe or something. Like it paid off handsomely to reinvent himself, to take his career under his own control. He's making a lot more money. His time is his own. His schedule is his own. And now he's got employees and stuff like that. So I do feel like for some people, it is an option now more than ever to go for the gold ring and try to jump ship from the rut you've been in.
David, I want to talk about your new book. You wrote a book called How to Prepare for Climate Change. But before we do that, I just want to do this quick little lightning round of questions, just of topics and your quick takes on them, because you're an opinionated guy and I think you have great opinions. So let's start off here with Jeopardy. I think you're a fan of Jeopardy. I think you once presented a video clue. Is that right?
I did.
What do you think of the guest host situation? Who is your favorite?
I think it's been a fascinating experiment. I think there's a lot to be said for Ken Jennings.
Oh, fair enough. Personally, I think Bill Whitaker was the strongest.
Yeah, he was fantastic too. Yeah.
But Ken, it might be Ken permanently. That whole thing was a mess.
Oh my gosh.
Unbelievable. Virtual reality. Should we be going out and buying these Oculus headsets and so forth, or is it not quite ready yet?
I think that it turns out that it's ideal for certain situations. You know, it fulfills niches great. Clearly, the great VR revolution that everybody expected, where it would replace going out to movies and we would have meetings that way. I mean, none of that happened, and I don't think any of that will happen. So it's great for certain games. It's great for touring a place that you can't visit in person. You know, surgeons are experimenting with doing remote surgery, but I'd say those are silos. So yeah,
right.
I would say not mass appeal yet.
Cryptocurrency. You an investor? Are you wary of the whole thing? What do you think?
I'm an investor. I bought a small amount in May just because it seemed to continue to go up. I do not believe it will become a commonplace, mass accepted currency. I think, you know, everybody says, well, the beauty of it is it's perfect for privacy, and who needs that much privacy but people doing things they need to keep private.
Right.
So clearly there's a large audience for it, but I'm not convinced it's for the mainstream.
Plastic straws. Do we need to be concerned about this? Is it really going to make an impact? You just wrote a book about climate change. What do we think there?
Plastic is a gigantic problem. We invented it in the 50s. Like, hard to believe that your grandparents had never used plastic. I mean, that's just mind-blowing. And my parents. So we invented this stuff whose principal virtue is that it's indestructible and lasts forever. And we just never figured out what to do with it once we were done with it. So at this point, there's microplastic in your drinking water. It's in pregnant women's placentas. It's in our food. It's obviously killing a lot of animals. So I think we really have to do something about the plastic problem. The straws are a problem because you can't recycle them. They get jammed in the recycling equipment. They jam the recycling equipment, and they have to stop the line and hand pluck them out of the gears. So largely they were, I would say, a symbol of rejecting single-use plastic. And in that way, I think they're useful, but really we have to revisit the entire concept of single-use and zero-use plastic. And by that, I mean, when you get takeout and they throw plastic cutlery into your bag that you intend to take home and eat with your own silverware at home anyway. Right. So you just throw out the plastic without ever even using it. So it's a gigantic problem that keeps me up at night. And I mean, there's a growing awareness, I think, and that's good. But I would encourage you and anyone listening to this next time you're at CVS or Duane Reade and you're buying AA batteries and they put it in a plastic bag for you to carry one block to the subway, I would say, that's okay. I don't need the bag. Say it. It's okay.
I want to talk some more about climate change and about your new book, but I want to ask you one more thing before we do that. You come across to me like a guy who's into, I don't know, American Pickers, that sort of thing. Are you a collector of anything?
No, I'm really not. In fact, I'm at a stage in my life where I'm trying to shed clutter. So yeah, I would say no on that one.
Okay, interesting. You just wrote a book called How to Prepare for Climate Change. Why now? And who's this book for?
Excellent questions. I pitched in 2019 a different book to the various publishers, and Simon & Schuster said, yeah, we love this idea for a book, but we'd like you to do a 2-book deal with us. And we know what the other book is, and we'd like you to start with it. It's called How to Prepare for Climate Change. And right there in their office, my mind went, oh my gosh, that is a great idea, because it could be where to live and how to invest and how to insure and how to make your house resilient against storms and how to talk to your children and how you can keep plants growing in your garden in the new climate. It could be every conceivable thing that has to do with preparing for this new world. And what's wild is that both the title and that list of chapters that I just rattled off became the book. In that second, nothing changed. And the reason, I think, is that everything we hear about climate change and what we need to do has to do with mitigation, meaning how to stop emitting greenhouse gases. Fly less, eat less red meat, take public transportation. That's all super important, and we all need to do that. But there's another way to look at it, and that is we need to start adapting to what's already in front of us. Every year, 25 million Americans get hit by one weather disaster or another linked to climate change. And, people are dying, people are losing their homes. And if they'd taken certain steps in advance, inexpensive steps that are more thinking things through than spending money, they'd be much more resilient. And they'd also sleep better at night, knowing that they've taken some steps against this really frightening situation. So that's the idea. About the book is for lay people. That is, it's for everybody. It's not for governments. It's not for huge corporations. And it's the steps you can take today to protect yourself against stuff that will be coming your way. How to ride out a heat wave, how to ride out a flood, how to ride out hurricanes, wildfires, the tick epidemic, things like that.
It's an inevitable problem, and you're saying that there are things that we could be doing to prepare for it.
That's exactly it. That's exactly the point.
And also I know your book probably doesn't really go much into this, but on a legislative level, like stepping out of the Paris Accords, it was a terrible decision, right?
It was a terrible decision, both for the planet and for the United States' standing among the other countries of the world. In other words, they learned they can't trust us. They learned that if we, one of the 2 largest polluters in the world, aren't going to do anything about it, why should they? I will also say that the last chapter of the book is called Where to Find Hope. And it outlines some of the work that is being done, some of the changes that are being made to fight the problem. And it turns out that during the Trump administration, those 4 years, 24 out of the 50 states signed a pledge called We Are Still In, which meant that they were going to stay in the Paris goals, even though the federal government opted out of it. So half the country stuck with it and kept making progress on lowering emissions. And you're seeing a lot of that stuff in places where it counts. Every single car manufacturer, including incredibly General Motors, the company everybody thought was in bed with the petroleum industry, is switching to solely electric cars, and quickly. We have 10,000 corporations, also big polluters, who have revealed their plans to decarbonize. And of course, we have a president who cares very much about the climate situation and is is working really hard to do something about it. So there's some really good news.
So it's not all bad news, people, but you can go ahead and get David's new book, as I think you should. And I highly endorse this book because I think we need to prepare for this. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and here's a special option for your listeners. Since I can't come and autograph books during, they're not doing book signings during the pandemic, but if anyone feels like emailing me, Pogue, my last name, Pogue at me.com, like me, I'll mail you an autographed book plate, like a sticker that you put in the front of the book. I'll make it out to your name. So just send in
Thanks,
your name
David.
and address, and I'll mail it.
That's
to
a
you.
very generous offer. I'm sure people are going to take you up on that. So you're probably going to have a lot of signing to do.
I hope so.
David, is there anything else we should let the people know? Of course, they can watch you every Sunday morning on CBS News Sunday Morning, my favorite show. If you're not watching it, I don't know what you're doing. Start. You can't miss this information.
You clearly have excellent taste.
David, really, thank you so much for joining me. This has been so much fun. I could talk to you all day, but I know you got important things to do.
No, this is super fun, and your preparation and your questions, I'm telling you, in 20 years, I mean, nobody's gone that deep. So deeply appreciated and a little bit scary.
Thanks, David. Anything else you want to tell people? Sunday morning.
Well, I may as well
change?
Announce it here that on October 15th, CBS is launching my new podcast. It is called Unsung Science with David Pogue, and each episode tells the behind the scenes story of a cool scientific or technological development that we take for granted. Like how the mRNA vaccine got developed, got invented, how we landed our rover on Mars so gently that we didn't even stir up dust, and how the Impossible Burger got invented when hundreds of people had tried plant-based burgers before and failed, stuff like that. So each week for 15 weeks, we'll dive into a different untold science story.
Amazing. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I'll be sure to tune in.
Yeah, it's good.
We didn't even discuss your history with Nova. Are you still involved with them?
Yeah, I mean, I've hosted 20 Nova specials, and years can go by between them, but they call me up when they have something that they think I'd be good for.
Cool. Well, we'll look out for you there as well.
All right, man. Well, thank you for this. This is tremendous fun.
This was so much fun. I appreciate it, David. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
Take care.